Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight. I'm Lauren Scott, Chair of the Spirit of Texas Reading List Committee. In this episode, we are excited to welcome Spirit of Texas 2024 honoree, Kacy Ritter, author of the middle grade novel, The Great Texas Dragon Race. Joining us for this interview is Spot Committee member Sandra Naranjo. Sandra Naranjo is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point and completed her Master's of Library Science from Sam Houston State University. She has been in education for over 29 years and a librarian for 19 years. She currently serves as the librarian at South Texas ISD, a magnet district on the Mexican border. This is her third year on the Spot Committee. She has 2 college-aged kids, a husband, 2 dogs, and 4 cats. All right, Sandra, take it away.
All right, we would like to welcome our author today, Kacy Ritter. And Kacy, I'm going to introduce you if you're okay with that. As a kid, Kacy moved around Western Europe with her oil company dad and kooky book-loving mother. Surrounded by art projects and rows of fantasy novels, her mom taught her about druids as her dad toted the family from castle to castle. As they traveled, she consumed middle grade and YA books, series while dreaming of dragons and building tiny homes for fairies in shoeboxes. She landed in the Lone Star State at age 12 and later went on to pursue her BFA at the University of Texas in Austin and a master's at the University of North Texas. Today, Kacy Ritter resides in Houston, Texas, where she writes science fiction fantasy for children. Most of her friends are fictional characters. Woohoo! So Kacy wrote a fantastic book, The Great Texas Dragon Race, and it's probably going to blur out. Sorry. So Kacy, tell our viewers who have not read this fantastic book about the book.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, guys. So my book is about exactly what the title says. So it says The Great Texas Dragon Race. And one of the reasons I love that title is because it's just going to give you a clear window into what the story is about. So it is about a young dragon rider and her bestie dragon, and they're going to take off across the Lone Star skies to try to win a big cash prize and hopefully save their family's dragon sanctuary.
So it sounds like an exciting and fantastic book. What inspired you to write The Great Dragon Race?
So they always say, write what you know. And I know a lot about Texas and a lot about dragons. So I figured I would just marry those two things and write a story that hopefully was a little bit original. And I just really think that if there's a place for dragons to be, Texas is a really great candidate. So I wanted to see dragons in our state, all over our state.
What kind of research did you do for a book like this? And how long did you spend researching dragons before writing this book?
So I actually spent less time researching dragons than I did the state of Texas, oddly enough. And so a lot of the dragons either were dragons I had already dreamt of in my head and I just really wanted to be, in the story, or they were dragons that were based off of reptiles or dinosaurs that already existed. So I think about things like bearded dragons or Dilophosaurus and how those influence some of the night-frilled racing nesters that are in the book. You also have classic things like the Hydra. And so I had all of those things that were already existing in my mind. But the research around the state of Texas and where exactly all of these dragons would reside and how they would exist in that environment is really what took a lot of the time, because I think at the end of the day, every dragon that I had placed in one of these unique locations in Texas, I was hoping was really going to be tied to what that environment might be like and how those dragons might exist in that world.
So then your dragons are based on your ideas.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
My ideas, and then borrowing from just, I think when you're somebody like me who has read so many dragon stories, you just get infused with dragon knowledge. And so, some of them, while they may not be entirely original, they're things that just rest in my heart and my mind from all of the stories I've ever read. So there's no treasure hoarding dragons in this particular book, although there could be in another one.
Why did you decide to include coordinates for each location in the book?
So, as the entire race takes place across the entire state of Texas, I wanted to have touch points so that you could actually think about where in the state these individual tasks were taking place. So, as the race is going on, there's these tasks where each stopping point they have to engage with some of the dragons that are in their natural landscape. And so I wanted to really give that game feel by having the coordinates for each of the chapters and really give you a touch point for where those dragons might actually be existing as you're going along this race.
How did you come up with infusing dragons with the Texas parks?
Oh, there's one of the things that's so interesting about Texas, especially if you're not from Texas or you've never been to Texas, is you don't realize how huge the state truly is. I mean, like we can look at a map and see how big it is, but we have massive biodiversity in this state, one of the highest in the country. And so you've got all of these different places and these different parks with entirely different settings. So Big Bend, for instance, is so different than other parts of even just other parts of West Texas. It's so different from Lubbock, which is just flat. It's so different from places in the Texas Hill Country. And so I really started thinking about how could these different dragons exist in these different places, and wanted to pretend that, let's say, state parks are houses for ecological preservation the way that they are, and some of that ecological preservation is preserving dragons.
Yeah, so cool. What made you design a hologram deck to deliver the clues?
Yeah, so there's this hologram deck that exists in the book to deliver these individual clues at each one of the tasks, so that the writers can figure out where they're going to go to next, or hopefully riddle out that clue and go to the right place. And I really was inspired a bit by the Hunger Games. And so using those sort of like the hologram images in the sky really kind of came to life for me. And I love anything that's science fiction, so it was really fun to kind of slip a little sci-fi in there, just for good measure.
I know we talked a little bit about this, but how long did you actually spend researching Texas parks?
Quite a long time. And so while I was writing, I had the outline for what I wanted to write, but I wasn't necessarily sure where all of the tasks were going to take place. I just knew that there were certain places in Texas I really wanted to hit. And so I'm actually really thankful that I have a couple Texas experts in my world who I would reach out to and say, hey, I have this dragon that I want to be able to, do X, Y, and Z. Where do you think this dragon might live? Or if I had a huge swarm of dragons that are similar to Mexican free-tailed bats, what would be a great state park for all of these little dragonettes to live? And so it wasn't just, research online. I was really getting to lean on some people who were super, super helpful in giving me some ideas about where these dragons would go. And that took, I would say, months. I mean, the book itself took about 18 months to write, and a good portion of that was just figuring out where these dragons were going to be.
What part of the book was the hardest to write and why?
So, as opposed to a scene being the hardest to write, the thing that was the hardest to write for me was actually trying to coordinate how long and the timeline from getting from one place to another, and how that would, so for instance, if they start here, how long would it take them to fly on Dragonback to this other location? How long would they be searching at this location for these new dragons? What time of day would it be? What time of day would it be when they arrived at the next location? And so there's some scenes that were, difficult to write because they were high emotion, high impact scenes, at least for me, like I think about with the three-headed Hydra. But the thing that was the most difficult was really getting that timeline and trying to think about, so the bestie dragon in the book is a fast, fiery pistol of a dragon, right? And then you have these other dragons that are much slower. So I'm trying to see how all of the different dragons would travel along this, map and this timeline and get all of the things correct. And I had to use some tools to help me do that.
I never even thought about that till you mentioned it. I mean, that's amazing that I mean, to try to figure that time length out would be a challenge, I would think.
It was fun though.
Who is your favorite character to write about, and why is that person your favorite?
So I actually have two. So I really, really loved writing Laura Torres, who quickly becomes one of the main character's closest allies. I identify with her. I love how sharp she was. There's so many things about that character that I just love and adore. And I hope that she can have her own story told someday. The other character that is my favorite is actually a dragon. And so that is the bestie dragon. That is Ranga. That is Cassidy's dragon, the main character's dragon. And I just love that dragon because she's smaller than all of the other dragons, and she really does have this traumatic history from being owned by Fire Corp, and really having to have the courage to overcome and face some of these larger dragons really spoke a lot to me. I think all of us can know what it feels like to be the small dragon around tons of larger dragons and having to just go through that fight and push through, because that's what courage is, right? It's being afraid and just going on anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you were to write a book about a side character, who would you pick and why?
I would love to write a book about the side character of Laura Torres, just because I just love her. But I think in thinking about other characters that I also love, I would love to have Ranga's story as well. So Ranga being that bestie dragon, like what was her story like before she ever came to Cassidy? Because in this particular instance, that dragon wasn't owned by Cassidy from the beginning of its life. That dragon had a, previous life being used as a bait dragon and being used in the oil industry in a way that was pretty traumatizing and not very exciting. So I would love to know what that backstory is and be able to write about that.
Can you tell us a bit about your new book coming out, The Marfa Monster Mystery?
Yes, I can. So obviously I like to write books set in Texas. And so this particular book is set in Marfa, Texas, and it is about a place called Vince Vance's Vintage Trailer Park Inn for Monsters. And so it is about a trio of kids who want to save their monster-friendly community. And so they're really trying to save it from the human skeptics who do not want monsters living in their community. And so the three kids are going to try to solve a mystery in order to try to protect their sacred trailer park inn.
That's awesome. When is it supposed to be coming out?
That will be out next summer.
Oh, that's great. Are you working on any other projects that we can look forward to?
That's the main one that I'm focused on right now, is I've actually just received an email back from my editor today. So I've got some edits to make on that. I do have another story that's cooking in the back of my head that I've written a bit on. It's called Camp Nobody. And so that will also be set in Texas because, again, I just love writing stories about Texas.
Well, we will definitely look forward to your books coming out. I'm sure they're going to be as good as this one. And we thank you for your time today. And I'm going to hand it back over to Lauren.
All right, thank you. Before I lead us out, I'm just curious, Kacy, since you are such a reader of, all these dragons, what is your favorite dragon story that you've read?
I know this is a huge cop out to say this, but I just love anything in the How to Train Your Dragon world. I just think it is so fun and fantastic. There's what's not to love about Hiccup. I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so many people are familiar with it. It's like that's a very connecting story. So I can definitely see that. I love that. Well, we are so glad to have had you with us today. Thank you for joining us today for our Spirit of Texas Author Spotlight with Kacy Ritter. Be sure to check out our Spirit of Texas website for book club activities, read-alikes, and more for the Great Texas Dragon Race and all of our 2024 Spirit of Texas books and authors. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon to the Texas Library Association's Young Adult Roundtable YouTube channel and to our Spirit of Texas website. And just thank you again, Kacy and Sandra, for our time together today. That was such a fun conversation.
Thank you so much.